Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a mother. But that day, when my baby passed away, my parents chose my brother's pool party over their grandchild's funeral. They said it was just a baby and that Jake's party mattered more. I buried my child alone, with no idea what I would do next. If you were me, what would you do when your family abandons you in your darkest moment? The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was still in the hospital bed, my arms empty, my heart shattered into pieces I didn't know could ever be put back together. The doctor had just left after explaining the final paperwork, and I was staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to breathe in a world where my baby no longer existed. My phone buzzed. "Mom, honey, we heard. We're so sorry." Her voice sounded rushed, distracted. I could hear Dad talking in the background about something involving ice and decorations. "But sweetie, we have a situation." A situation. My baby died, and she called it a situation. "Jake's pool party is this Saturday. You remember, right? The one he's been planning for months? His boss is coming and some potential investors. This could really make his career, Madison. You understand." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, certain I was mishearing. "Mom, the funeral is Saturday." "I know, honey, but, well, Jake scheduled this first, and honestly, it's just, it wasn't even, you were only 6 months along. Jake needs us right now." The line went quiet, except for the sound of my heart breaking all over again. In the background, I heard Jake's voice. "Tell her I'll do a memorial thing later, maybe next month when things calm down." "Mom?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Madison, you're being dramatic. This is hard on all of us, but we have to think about the living. Jake's future is at stake. You'll understand when you're thinking more clearly." Click. I stared at my phone screen, watching it fade to black. 47 missed calls from the family group chat titled "Pool Party Updates" started flooding in. Photos of decorations, food prep. The pool Jake had installed just for this event. The same pool that cost $15,000, the exact amount my parents had told me they couldn't contribute toward funeral expenses because money was tight right now. I scrolled through the messages with shaking hands. Jake posting photos of the catered spread. Mom sharing pictures of the custom pool floats shaped like dollar signs because this was a success celebration. Dad sending videos of the DJ setting up equipment. Not one mention of me. Not one mention of their grandchild who would be buried in 3 days. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jake. "Look, Maddie, I'm sorry about your loss and all, but this party took months to plan. Mom and Dad already committed. You're being selfish making this about you. People deal with this stuff all the time. Get over it. Get over it." I screenshot that message along with all the others. Something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, crushing and absolute, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt like ice-cold clarity. The funeral director, Mr. Peterson, called that afternoon. "Ms. Madison, I wanted to confirm the arrangements for Saturday. Will there be many attendees? Should we prepare the larger chapel?" I looked around my empty apartment at the baby clothes I'd folded just days ago, at the crib Jake had helped me assemble last month before he got too busy with his career moves. "Just me," I said. "It'll just be me." "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. How many?" "One person. Just me." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "In 30 years of service, I've never— Are you certain no family members will be attending?" "I'm certain." Saturday morning, I stood alone in the smallest chapel Peterson funeral home had available. Even that felt too big. The tiny white casket looked impossibly small under the fluorescent lights. I'd chosen a simple arrangement of white roses, paid for with my own savings, every penny I'd been setting aside for baby supplies. My phone sat silently in my purse. No calls, no texts. Radio silence from the Thompson family. But Instagram was very much alive. Jake had hired a professional photographer for the pool party. The stories were endless. Thompson family success celebration. Mom and Dad beaming by the pool. Jake doing a cannonball while his boss laughed. professional shots of everyone raising champagne glasses and toasts to new beginnings and family support. 847 photos of my family celebrating life while I buried my child alone. I turned my phone face down and walked to the front row. The funeral director had left a small guest book on a stand, though we both knew no one would sign it. I opened it anyway and wrote the first entry in careful script. Forever loved, forever remembered. Mama. Pastor Williams arrived 20 minutes early, probably expecting to see other family members. His face fell when he realized it was just the two of us. Mrs. Madison, he said gently, are others still coming? I shook my head. They had something more important to do. Pastor Williams had officiated funerals for 30 years, but I watched something change in his expression. Shock, maybe, or anger. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded and said, "Then we'll make this beautiful. Your baby deserves that." And he did. Pastor Williams spoke about love that transcends loss, about the preciousness of every life, no matter how brief. He talked about the bonds between mother and child that death cannot break. He made my baby's short existence matter in a way my own family refused to. When it was over, I sat alone in the front pew while Pastor Williams handled the final arrangements. My phone buzzed with a notification. Jake had posted a video compilation of pool party highlights set to upbeat music. The caption read, "Best family day ever. So grateful for the people who show up when it matters. People who show up when it matters." I walked back to my car in a daze, clutching the small memorial card the funeral home had printed. As I reached for my door handle, something crinkled in my coat pocket. I pulled out a small handkerchief, vintage, with delicate hand-embroidered edges. It had been my grandmother's, tucked away in the baby things I'd inherited when she passed. Grandma Thompson. The woman who'd taught me that family meant showing up, especially when it hurt, who'd held my hand through every skinned knee and broken heart of my childhood, who'd been so excited about her first great-grandchild that she'd started embroidering baby blankets before I'd even announced the pregnancy. I held the handkerchief up to the dim chapel light. In the corner, in thread so fine I'd never noticed it before, were tiny initials. For the ones we protect. Grandma had embroidered that. For the ones we protect. I thought about Jake's pool party, about the $15,000, about being called dramatic and selfish. I thought about 847 photos of my family celebrating while their grandchild lay in a casket I'd paid for alone. "Grandma," I whispered, clutching the handkerchief. "I'm going to use this to protect what really matters. They have no idea what they've started." 3 days later, Jake posted another round of pool party photos with a new caption. "Family is everything. Thanks to Mom and Dad for making this happen. Success tastes even sweeter when shared with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. I screenshot that too, adding it to the growing folder on my phone labeled Evidence. Because somewhere between standing alone at that funeral and finding Grandma's handkerchief, I'd realized something important. My family had made their choice about what mattered to them. Now it was time for me to make mine. I started by doing something I'd never done before. I began paying attention. Really paying attention. To bank statements and Venmo transactions and casual conversations about money. To social media posts and family group chats and who got invited to what. The pattern became clear almost immediately. My college graduation party had been canceled because Jake needed help moving into his new apartment. My wedding had been overshadowed by Jake's promotion celebration the same weekend. When I'd announced my pregnancy, the family dinner had been cut short because Jake wanted to show off his new car. And now, my baby's funeral had been skipped for Jake's pool party. Every milestone of my life had been eclipsed by something Jake needed, something Jake wanted, something that would benefit Jake's future. And my parents had enabled it every single time, convincing me that I was being selfish, dramatic, unreasonable for wanting my own moments to matter. But this time was different. This time, they'd gone too far. You can ask someone to downplay their joy, their success, their happiness for the sake of family peace. But asking someone to downplay their grief? To bury their child alone because your golden child's career networking event was more important? That was where I drew the line. I opened my laptop and started typing. Bank records first, screenshots of every Venmo payment Mom and Dad had sent Jake in the past year. The pool installation, $15,000. The exact amount they'd claimed they couldn't afford to help with funeral expenses. Then the text messages. Jake telling me to get over it, Mom saying it was just a baby, Dad explaining that Jake's future was at stake. All of it documented, time-stamped, impossible to deny. Finally, the social media evidence. Every single photo and video from the pool party while their grandchild was being buried across town. The timestamps didn't lie. The champagne toasts happened during the exact hour of the funeral service. I saved everything to a secure folder, backed it up in 3 different places, and then sat back in my chair. The handkerchief lay on my desk beside the laptop, and I could swear I felt Grandma's presence in the room with me. You taught me that actions have consequences, I said aloud to her memory. You taught me that family means showing up. They forgot those lessons, Grandma, but I didn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Pool's looking great. You should come over this weekend. Time to move on, right? Life's too short to stay stuck in the past. Life's too short. I stared at that message for a long moment, then typed back, You're absolutely right, Jake. Life is too short. Too short to waste on people who skip funerals for pool parties. I hit send before I could change my mind. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Jake was typing and deleting, typing and deleting. Finally, nothing came through. But I wasn't done, not even close. I opened my computer again and began researching. Funeral directors, pastors, photographers. Anyone who'd been working that Saturday and might have documented the contrast between my empty chapel and Jake's crowded pool party. Pastor Williams had mentioned keeping records of all services. That was my first call. Pastor Williams, this is Madison Thompson. I wanted to thank you again for Saturday. I also wanted to ask if you keep any records of the services you perform. Of course, Mrs. Madison. Is there something specific you need? I took a deep breath. I need documentation that I was alone that day. Official documentation, timestamps, attendee records, anything that proves what actually happened. There was a pause. May I ask why? Because, I said, looking at the handkerchief on my desk, sometimes the truth needs witnesses, and sometimes family needs to learn what really matters. Pastor Williams was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll have those records ready for you by tomorrow. In 30 years of ministry, some things shouldn't be forgotten. Thank you, Pastor. Some things shouldn't be forgiven either. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment, surrounded by baby clothes I still couldn't bring myself to pack away. The handkerchief caught the afternoon light coming through the window, and for just a moment, it seemed to shimmer. Grandma had always said that truth had a way of surfacing, especially when people tried hardest to bury it. My family thought they'd buried my baby's memory under their celebration of Jake's success. They had no idea that I was just getting started digging it back up. Pastor Williams had the records ready the next morning, exactly as promised. I drove to his office with shaking hands, not sure what I expected to find, but knowing I needed every piece of evidence I could gather. The manila folder he handed me was thicker than I'd anticipated. Inside were photos, official documentation photos that funeral homes require for their records. My baby's service, time-stamped at 2:15 p.m. The empty chapel with its single attendee. Me, standing alone in a black dress that still smelled like the hospital. But Pastor Williams had gone further than I'd asked. He'd printed out social media posts from that same day, all time-stamped. Jake's pool party photos began at 1:30 p.m. and continued until nearly midnight. While I was saying goodbye to my child, my family was doing champagne toasts 50 feet from Jake's new $15,000 pool. Mrs. Madison, Pastor Williams said quietly, I've been doing this for 3 decades. I've seen families torn apart by grief, but I've never seen a family simply absent. This documentation exists because what happened to you should never happen to anyone. I clutched the folder against my chest. Thank you. This means everything. There's something else. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. Margaret Chen. She's a family counselor who specializes in toxic family dynamics. She volunteers at the crisis center downtown. I think you should talk to her. The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Margaret Chen. I'd seen her quoted in articles about narcissistic family systems, about golden children and scapegoats, about families who prioritize one child's success over another's basic human needs. You think my family is toxic? I asked, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew the answer. Pastor Williams leaned forward. Madison, I think your family trained you to accept treatment that no healthy family would ever consider normal. And I think it's time you had someone help you see that clearly. I made the appointment with Margaret Chen that afternoon, but first, I had more digging to do. I started with bank records, not just the recent ones, but going back years. My parents had joint accounts with Jake for family business purposes, something I'd never questioned before. Now I requested statements going back 5 years, using my access as their emergency contact to gather financial records. What I found made my stomach turn. College tuition, Jake's private university education, fully paid. My community college, student loans that I was still paying off. Car purchases, Jake's BMW, purchased outright with a $25,000 family loan that had never been repaid. My 10-year-old Honda that I'd bought myself with a payment plan. Housing, Jake's down payment for his house, $60,000 from family savings. When I'd asked for help with my apartment deposit 2 years ago, I'd been told money was tight. Medical expenses, Jake's elective surgery last year, covered entirely by family funds. My hospital bills from the pregnancy and loss, which I'd paid alone while they spent $15,000 on his pool party. The pattern wasn't just recent. It went back decades. Every major expense in Jake's life had been subsidized by family money, while I'd been expected to handle everything independently. When I succeeded, it was because I was responsible and capable. When Jake succeeded, it was because the family had rallied around him with financial and emotional support. I printed everything. Bank transfers, Venmo payments, loan documents, receipts. The evidence painted a picture so clear that even my parents' gaslighting couldn't explain it away. But the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Jake had hired a professional photographer for the pool party, someone named Derek Martinez who specialized in corporate events and family celebrations. I found his website and saw the gallery from Jake's party. Professional shots of my family toasting new beginnings while I buried my baby across town. I called Derek's studio. "Hi, this is Madison Thompson. You photographed my brother Jake's pool party last Saturday." "Oh, yes. Beautiful event. Your family really knows how to celebrate. Is this about ordering prints?" My throat tightened. "Actually, I'm wondering about the timeline. What time did the party start?" "We began shooting at 1:30 p.m. Your parents specifically requested full coverage of the toasts around 2:30 because they said it was such an important family moment." 2:30 p.m. The exact time Pastor Williams had documented my baby's burial service. "Did anyone mention why certain family members weren't there?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Actually, yes. Someone asked about a missing daughter, and your mother said you were dealing with some personal drama and that Jake's success celebration couldn't wait for everyone's schedule." Personal drama. I thanked Derek and hung up, adding his contact information to my growing file. Then I called Margaret Chen. "Margaret, this is Madison Thompson. Pastor Williams referred me. I think I need help understanding my family." "I have an opening this afternoon," she said gently. Pastor Williams filled me in on some of the basics. "Madison, I want you to know that what happened to you at that funeral, that's not normal family behavior. That's a pattern of emotional abuse that probably goes back much further than you realize." The session with Margaret Chen changed everything. She had me walk through my entire family history, every birthday, graduation, achievement, and crisis. She took notes while I talked, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made me see patterns I'd been blind to my entire life. "Madison," she said when I finished, "you've been the family scapegoat since childhood. Your parents have a golden child, Jake, whose needs always come first, and a scapegoat, you. whose role is to be responsible, self-sufficient, and understanding when resources and attention go to the golden child. "But they love me," I protested automatically. "Love isn't just a feeling, it's a behavior. Love shows up. Love prioritizes important moments. Love doesn't tell you to get over burying your child alone." She leaned forward. "Madison, healthy parents would have canceled any event, no matter how important, to be at their grandchild's funeral. The fact that yours didn't tells you everything you need to know about where you rank in their priorities." I left Margaret's office with a reading list about narcissistic family systems and a homework assignment. Document every instance in the past 5 years when my needs had been dismissed in favor of Jake's wants. The list filled 17 pages. My engagement party, canceled because Jake wanted to announce his promotion the same weekend. My birthday dinner, moved 3 times to accommodate Jake's schedule, then finally canceled altogether when he decided to take a spontaneous weekend trip. My miscarriage 2 years ago, the one before this pregnancy, barely acknowledged because Jake was stressed about a work presentation, and now my baby's funeral skipped for his pool party. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed one more piece. I needed witnesses who weren't family, people who had observed this pattern from the outside. I started reaching out to family friends, neighbors, co-workers, anyone who had been around for major family events over the years. What I heard broke my heart and strengthened my resolve simultaneously. "We always wondered why you weren't at Jake's housewarming party," said Mrs. Patterson, our longtime neighbor. "Your parents said you were being difficult about something." I'd been in the hospital with complications from my first miscarriage. "I asked your mom about you at Jake's graduation party," said my cousin Sarah. "She said you were going through a phase and didn't want to celebrate other people's success." I'd been working 3 jobs to pay for my own education while Jake's was handed to him. "Your dad mentioned you were too emotional to come to Jake's promotion dinner last year," said Dr. Richards, my parents' longtime family friend. "We thought it was odd because you've always been such a supportive sister." I'd been grieving my first pregnancy loss and hadn't felt ready for a celebration. Every story followed the same pattern. When I wasn't present for Jake's moments, it was because I was being selfish, dramatic, difficult, or emotional. Never because I was dealing with my own legitimate struggles. Never because my absence might indicate that something was wrong. I documented every conversation, every witness statement, every piece of evidence that proved this wasn't an isolated incident, but a lifelong pattern of emotional abuse and favoritism. By the time I finished my investigation, I had a folder 3 inches thick, bank records proving financial favoritism, social media evidence of the pool party during the funeral, witness statements from decades of prioritizing Jake over me, professional documentation from Pastor Williams and Derek Martinez, and most importantly, I had clarity. This wasn't about one terrible decision. This was about a family system that had trained me to accept crumbs while Jake got the feast, to be grateful for neglect while he received worship, to apologize for my needs while his wants were treated as commands. Margaret Chin had given me a term for it: golden child scapegoat dynamics in a narcissistic family system. I wasn't crazy, oversensitive, or difficult. I was the child who had been assigned the role of family sacrifice from birth, but now I had evidence, and in 6 weeks I would have the perfect opportunity to present it. Jake's 30th birthday party, the biggest celebration yet, planned for months with the entire extended family invited. Everyone who had enabled this system for decades would be there, gathered around the very pool that had been more important than my baby's funeral. I looked at Grandma's handkerchief, now permanently placed on my desk beside the evidence folder. "For the ones we protect," I whispered. "I'm protecting my baby's memory, Grandma, and I'm protecting any future children from learning that their lives matter less than their cousins' pool parties." The invitation to Jake's birthday party arrived 2 weeks later, hand-delivered by Mom with a cautious smile. "We really hope you'll come, sweetheart. It's time for the family to heal and move forward together." Move forward. Their favorite phrase for asking me to forget their latest betrayal without any acknowledgement or apology. "Of course I'll be there," I said, accepting the elegant invitation. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Mom's face brightened with relief. Oh, good. I was worried you were still upset about, well, but Jake's birthday will be such a wonderful fresh start for all of us. After she left, I opened the invitation. The party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Pool party, naturally. Catered dinner, professional photography. All the extended family, Jake's coworkers, his boss, the neighbors. Everyone who mattered in my parents' social circle would be there. Perfect. I made a few calls that afternoon. Derek Martinez was available for additional photography services. Pastor Williams confirmed he would be in town. Margaret Chen agreed to be present as my support person. My cousin Sarah, who had been horrified when I told her the truth about the funeral, volunteered to help coordinate. But the most important call was to my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Henderson. Grandma had left me several items in her will, including some family documents I'd never bothered to examine. It was time to see what other truths my family had been hiding. Mr. Henderson's office was downtown in one of those old buildings that smelled like leather and secrets. He pulled out a box I'd never seen before, labeled, "For Madison, when she's ready for the truth." Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in my grandmother's careful script. "Madison, darling," the first one began, "if you're reading this, it means you've finally seen through your parents' treatment of you. I've watched them favor Jake since he was born, and I've seen how they've trained you to accept less than you deserve. I've documented it all, hoping someday you'd be strong enough to use this information." Grandma had kept records, for decades. Every birthday forgotten, every achievement dismissed, every time my needs were sacrificed for Jake's wants. She documented the financial favoritism, the emotional neglect, the systematic erosion of my self-worth. But the most shocking discovery was a letter she'd written to my parents after my first miscarriage, begging them to show up for me the way they did for Jake. Their response was included in the file, a cold, dismissive letter telling her to mind her own business and stop enabling Madison's attention-seeking behavior. Attention-seeking behavior. For grieving a pregnancy loss. I sat in Mr. Henderson's office and cried. For my grandmother who had seen the truth and tried to protect me, for my baby who would never know how much he was loved, and for the daughter I had been who spent 30 years believing she wasn't worthy of showing up. "Your grandmother left one more thing," Mr. Henderson said gently, handing me a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, her mother's ring passed down through generations. A note was tucked beneath it. "For the daughter who learned to protect herself. Wear this when you tell the truth. I'll be with you." I slipped the ring onto my finger next to Grandma's handkerchief, now embroidered with my baby's initials. 2 generations of women who had learned that family love isn't automatic. It's earned through actions, not words. Jake's birthday party was 2 days away. I had my evidence, my witnesses, and my grandmother's blessing. Most importantly, I had something I'd never possessed before. Absolute clarity about who my family really was and what they'd done to me. They thought they were gathering to celebrate Jake's success. They had no idea they were about to witness the end of their golden child scapegoat system forever. I spent the morning of the party getting ready with the same care I'd taken for my wedding. Black dress, appropriate for mourning the family relationships that were about to end. Grandma's ring on my right hand, her handkerchief tucked in my purse. The evidence folder in my car, along with backup copies stored safely with Margaret Chen and Pastor Williams. Sarah picked me up at noon. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as we drove toward my parents' house. "I buried my baby alone while they celebrated with champagne," I said, watching the familiar neighborhood roll past. "I'm sure." The party was in full swing when we arrived. The same pool, the same catered setup, the same professional photographer. Jake was holding court by the diving board, regaling his boss with stories about his success, while my parents beamed with pride. I walked through the crowd with Sarah, greeting family members I hadn't seen since the funeral they'd all skipped. Everyone was warm, friendly, acting as if nothing had happened, as if their absence from the most devastating day of my life was just water under the bridge. "Madison," Jake called out when he spotted me. "You made it. See? I told everyone you'd get over it eventually." Get over it eventually. I smiled and walked toward the pool area where everyone was gathering for the official birthday toast. Derek Martinez was setting up for photos, the same photographer who had documented my family's celebration during my baby's burial. "Can I have everyone's attention?" I called out, my voice carrying across the yard. The crowd quieted, champagne glasses raised in preparation for the birthday toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Jake today. This pool looks amazing, doesn't it?" I gestured toward the sparkling water. $15,000 well spent. Jake beamed, not catching the edge in my voice. "Thanks, sis. Worth every penny." "That's exactly what our parents spent on this pool," I continued, my voice growing stronger. $15,000. The same amount they claimed they couldn't afford to help with my baby's funeral expenses. The crowd grew silent. Someone's champagne glass clinked against another person's in the sudden quiet. "While I buried my child alone 6 weeks ago, everyone in this yard was here celebrating Jake's pool party. Same day, same time. I have the timestamps to prove it." I pulled out my phone and held up the funeral director's photos, then Derek's pool party shots side by side. 2:30 p.m., my baby's burial service on the left, your champagne toast on the right. The silence was deafening now. My mother's face had gone pale. Jake was staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "Madison, please," Mom said quietly. "Don't do this here." "Don't do what here, Mom? Tell the truth? Share the facts?" I looked around at the crowd of family friends and neighbors who had no idea what had really happened. "Everyone here thought you were out of town that day, didn't they? That's what you told people, that I was dealing with personal drama and couldn't make it to Jake's party." Dr. Richards stepped forward, his face confused. "Wait, Margaret, you said Madison was going through a difficult phase." "The difficult phase was burying my 6-month-old baby by myself," I said clearly, "while my parents chose to attend this pool party instead of their grandchild's funeral." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," in the background. "That's enough," Dad said sharply. "You're embarrassing the family." "I'm embarrassing the family?" I laughed, and it sounded strange in the silence. "Let me tell you about embarrassing. Embarrassing is having a funeral director ask why no family members are attending your baby's service. Embarrassing is standing alone in a chapel while your parents toast champagne 50 feet from a pool they deemed more important than their grandchild's life." I reached into my purse and pulled out the evidence folder. I have 5 years of bank records showing exactly how family money gets distributed in this house. Jake's college, fully paid. Mine, student loans I'm still paying. Jake's car, $25,000 cash gift. My car, used Honda I bought myself. Jake's house down payment, $60,000 from family savings. My apartment deposit 2 years ago. Sorry, money's tight. The crowd was shifting uncomfortably. Several people were staring at my parents with expressions I'd never seen before. "Madison," Jake said, his voice tight with anger, "you're making a scene. Mom and Dad support me because I'm building a career. You're just bitter because..." "Because what, Jake? Because I expected my baby's funeral to matter more than your pool party?" That's when Pastor Williams stepped through the crowd. I hadn't seen him arrive, but there he was, distinguished and somber in his clerical collar. "I can confirm everything Madison has said," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in ministry. "I officiated that funeral. In 30 years of service, I have never conducted a burial where only one family member was present." While this celebration was happening, Madison stood alone, saying goodbye to her child. The impact was immediate. People began stepping away from my parents as if their behavior might be contagious. Dr. Richards looked sick. Mrs. Patterson was openly staring at my mother with disgust. "This is ridiculous," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction now. It was complicated timing. We couldn't reschedule." "You couldn't reschedule a pool party?" Pastor Williams asked quietly. "For your nephew's funeral?" "It wasn't even really a baby yet," Mom blurted out, then immediately looked like she regretted the words. The silence that followed was absolute. Pastor Williams stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, in 3 decades of ministry, I have learned that every life matters. Every loss deserves to be grieved. Every child deserves family who will show up, especially in death. We sent flowers, Dad said weakly. You sent flowers, I repeated. To the funeral you didn't attend, for the grandchild whose life you valued less than pool party appetizers. I looked around at the crowd of people who had known me my entire life. People who had watched me graduate, get married, struggle through 2 miscarriages and a difficult pregnancy. People who deserved to know what kind of family they'd been socializing with for decades. I want everyone here to understand something, I said, my voice steady and clear. This isn't about one bad decision. This is about 30 years of being taught that my needs don't matter, that Jake's wants will always trump my needs, that I should be grateful for crumbs while he gets the feast. I pulled out Grandma's handkerchief, now embroidered with my baby's initials. My grandmother left me this with a note. For the ones we protect. I'm protecting my baby's memory. I'm protecting the truth. And I'm protecting any future children in this family from learning that their lives matter less than pool parties and career advancement. Sarah stepped up beside me, along with my cousin Rachel, who had driven in from out of state. We believe Madison, Sarah said loudly. We've all seen this pattern for years. The family scapegoat finally telling the truth, Rachel added. About time. More family members began nodding. Aunt Linda stepped forward. I asked why Madison wasn't at Jake's graduation party. You said she was being difficult. She was in the hospital, Sarah said flatly. Miscarriage. Uncle Tom spoke up. And Jake's housewarming? You said she was going through a phase? Same hospital stay, Rachel confirmed. One by one, family members who had been fed lies about my absences learned the truth. The pattern became undeniable. Every time I'd missed Jake's celebrations, it was because I was dealing with genuine crises that my parents had dismissed as drama, phases, or attention-seeking behavior. Jake's boss, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat uncomfortably. I think maybe I should go. This seems like a family matter. Actually, I said, turning to him, this is exactly what you need to see. You're considering Jake for promotion, right? Ask yourself, what kind of character does it show when someone skips their nephew's funeral for a pool party? What kind of judgment does it demonstrate when someone tells their grieving sister to get over it and stop being dramatic? Mr. Harrison looked at Jake with new eyes. You skipped a baby's funeral for this party? It's complicated, Jake said desperately. Madison is exaggerating. I have documentation, I said simply. Times, dates, bank records, witness statements. Everything. I handed Mr. Harrison Derek's business card. He photographed both events. You can verify the timeline yourself. Jake's face went from red to white in seconds. His career networking event was becoming the revelation of his character deficit, and everyone could see it. Madison, Mom said, her voice breaking. Please, you're destroying our family. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in my life, without the filter of desperate need for approval. I'm not destroying our family, Mom. I'm revealing what it actually is. A family that prioritizes one child over another. A family that skips funerals for pool parties. A family that calls grief drama and loss attention-seeking behavior. I tucked Grandma's handkerchief back into my purse and adjusted her ring on my finger. I'm not the same daughter who spent 30 years accepting this treatment. I'm not the same sister who apologized for needing support. I'm the mother who buried her baby alone, and I will never forgive that. More importantly, I will never accept it as normal ever again. I turned to address the crowd one final time. To everyone here who truly cares about family, show up. When someone you love is grieving, show up. When someone you love is celebrating, show up. Don't let pool parties matter more than funerals. Don't let career networking trump family loss. And don't ever, ever tell someone grieving the death of their child that it's just a baby and they need to get over it. With that, I walked toward the gate, Sarah and Rachel flanking me. Behind us, the party dissolved into uncomfortable murmurs and the sound of people making excuses to leave early. As we reached my car, I heard Jake's voice calling after me. Madison, wait, we can work this out. I turned back one last time. Jake, some things can't be worked out. Some things can't be forgiven. You chose a pool party over your nephew's funeral. That choice defines who you are as a person, and who you are as a person is not someone I want in my life. The drive home was quiet. Sarah held my hand while I processed what I'd just done. I'd blown up the family system that had oppressed me for 30 years. I'd told the truth in front of everyone who mattered in my parents' social circle. I'd ended relationships that had been toxic my entire life. And for the first time since my baby died, I felt peace. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Grandma's handkerchief spread on my coffee table. Next to it, I placed the memorial card from my baby's funeral and a photo from Jake's pool party that someone had tagged me in on social media before quickly deleting it. The contrast was stark. My empty chapel versus their crowded celebration. My grief versus their champagne toasts. My solitude versus their community. But now, there was a difference. Now I had witnesses who knew the truth. Now I had family members who understood the pattern. Now I had a community of people who believed that every life matters, including mine. I picked up my phone and started typing. Today I did something I should have done 30 years ago. I protected myself. I protected my baby's memory. And I protected the truth from being buried under family loyalty and keeping the peace. Some of you have reached out asking how you can support me. Here's how. Create a memorial scholarship fund in my baby's name. Show up for people who are grieving. Don't let anyone tell you that loss doesn't matter or that grief is dramatic. And remember that family love is shown through actions, not just words. Within an hour, 17 people had committed to contributing to the memorial fund. Pastor Williams offered to help establish it through the church. Margaret Chen volunteered to speak at a grief counseling workshop in my baby's honor. My baby's life, which my parents had dismissed as insignificant, was creating more positive impact in death than Jake's pool party ever would. I looked at my grandmother's ring, catching the light from my living room lamp. I protected what matters, Grandma, just like you taught me. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I could breathe. The truth was out. The evidence was presented. The pattern was exposed. And I was finally completely free.